Behind your back!
Why?
Don't move!
Why am I being asked to exit the vehicle?
Shut up!
The dashboard camera kept rolling as Officer Daniel Rowe pressed his knee into the neck of a man wearing jeans and a plain t-shirt. He did not know that the man under him had just come home from serving his country overseas. The man's name was Army Sergeant Marcus Hill, and he had done nothing wrong. He had simply asked why he was being pulled out of his car. In only 47 seconds, what should have been a normal traffic stop would turn into a national story, one that would change both of their lives forever. But for now, those 47 seconds had not happened yet. At this moment, Officer Rowe still believed he was in control. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. This story needs to be heard, and your support helps us share it. Thank you, and let's continue. Marcus Hill was driving home from Fort Branson in South Carolina after a 6-month military deployment. He had taken off his uniform at the base because he wanted to feel like a normal person again, even for a little while. He wore a gray shirt, jeans, and sneakers. His military duffel bag was in the trunk, out of sight. His body was still used to another country's time zone, and his mind carried heavy memories, things he had seen and done that could not be easily forgotten. Marcus was 32 years old, had served in the Army for 11 years, and had just been promoted to sergeant. That promotion meant more trust and responsibility, a sign that his country believed in him. It was 9:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in March when he saw flashing blue lights in his rear-view mirror. He was driving through a small town called Redwood Falls, a quiet place with a population of about 4,000 people. He had never been there before. He was just passing through on his way to his mother's house 2 hours north. The speed limit sign said 45, and his speedometer showed 42. He knew he wasn't speeding. His registration was current. His driver's license was valid. He had not been drinking. There was no reason he could think of for being stopped. Marcus did what his father had taught him when he was 16. He pulled over right away, put the car in park, turned on the inside light, and placed both hands on the steering wheel at 10 and 2. His father had taught him how to survive a traffic stop as a black man in America. Keep your hands visible. Don't make sudden moves. Speak calmly. Be respectful. Don't argue on the roadside. Live first. Fight the injustice later. Marcus had hated those lessons as a teenager, but now, at 32, he understood why they mattered. Officer Daniel Rowe walked up to the driver's window with his hand resting on his gun. He was 41 years old and had been a police officer in Redwood Falls for 19 years. He had been reported 3 times for using too much force, but those complaints had been dismissed after internal investigations. Nothing had ever happened to him. In a small department with only 12 officers, everyone covered for each other. Rowe tapped on the glass with his flashlight. Marcus slowly lowered the window, keeping his hands where they could be seen. The officer pointed the flashlight directly at his face, holding it there longer than needed. Marcus didn't flinch. He had faced worse things in war zones. Without any greeting or explanation, Rowe demanded license and registration. Marcus explained where both items were before moving, speaking slowly and clearly. He handed them over and waited. The officer took his time checking the documents, shining the light again and again as if looking for something wrong. He saw the name Marcus Hill, saw an out-of-state address, saw a clean driving record. Nothing about it told him that the man in front of him was a soldier who had just returned from deployment. Then Rowe said, "Step out of the vehicle." Marcus hesitated and asked a simple question. "Why am I being asked to exit the vehicle?" That was all. One short question. But those 4 words, "Why am I being asked?" lit a fire inside Officer Rowe. Without warning, the officer yanked open the door. Hands grabbed Marcus's arm and dragged him out with sudden violence. Before his feet were steady on the ground, he was spun around and slammed face first against the side of his car. The hit knocked the air out of his chest. His body wanted to fight back. His military reflexes screamed to defend himself. But his mind overruled that instinct. He went limp. He knew that any move could be seen as resisting arrest. And resistance could mean death. Rowe twisted Marcus's arms behind his back, applying the handcuffs so tightly that sharp pain shot up his shoulders. He was thrown to the ground, his face scraping against the gravel. Then came the weight, a knee pressing into his neck, cutting off his breath. Marcus tried to speak, gasping, "My military. What did I do wrong?" The reply was short and cold, "Shut up." He could barely breathe. He felt fear rising in his chest, but forced himself to stay still. He didn't fight. He didn't resist. He simply lay there, hoping he would still be alive in 5 minutes. The dashboard camera in Rowe's car captured everything. The angle wasn't perfect, but it showed enough. The microphone picked up Marcus's voice, struggling to speak, trying to explain who he was, asking what he had done wrong. It picked up Rowe shouting, "Shut up." It picked up the sound of gravel scraping against skin and fabric. 47 seconds. That's how long it took for everything to fall apart. Rowe radioed for backup, saying he had a suspect resisting arrest, possibly dangerous. It was a lie, but it was recorded that way. He didn't see a soldier who had risked his life for his country. He saw what he wanted to see, someone he could dominate. Within 6 minutes, 2 other officers, James Porter and Chris Lowe, arrived. They saw Rowe kneeling on a man in jeans and a t-shirt, handcuffed, not fighting, not shouting, just lying still. Officer Porter, the younger one, felt sick watching it. He knew it looked wrong. But Rowe was a senior officer, someone he had looked up to since joining the force 3 years earlier. Porter hesitated, and that hesitation became a decision to do nothing. Lowe asked, "Need a hand?" Rowe finally lifted his knee from Marcus's neck and pulled him to his feet. Marcus wobbled, his balance gone, pain shooting through his shoulders. Do you think Officer Porter should have stepped in? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Rowe shoved Marcus into the patrol car with unnecessary force. Marcus's head hit the doorframe, adding another injury. At the police station, they took his belongings, his wallet, keys, and phone. When they checked his pockets, they found his military ID. The officer processing him paused when he saw it, looked at Rowe, then said nothing. He added the ID to the evidence bag and continued as if nothing had happened. Marcus was allowed one phone call. He called his mother and said quietly, "I won't be home tonight. Something happened. Please call a lawyer." His voice was calm, but his hands shook. His neck burned from where the knee had pressed down. His face and shoulders ached. He was placed in a holding cell and charged with resisting arrest and failure to follow a lawful order, both lies, now official in the system, stamped by the Redwood Falls Police Department. What Officer Rowe didn't know was that Marcus Hill wasn't just any soldier. He was 2 months away from receiving an award for bravery. During a firefight overseas, he had saved 4 soldiers trapped in a burning vehicle. High-ranking officers already knew his name. And Rowe also didn't know something else. A second camera had captured everything. Across the street, a gas station's security camera had a clear view of the stop. The owner of that gas station, a veteran himself, watched the footage the next morning. When he saw the man being thrown down and held under a knee for no reason, he knew it was wrong. He copied the footage and sent it to every news station he could find. By Thursday morning, 43 hours after Marcus was released on bail, the video was on national news. By Thursday afternoon, it had over 17 million views online. People were shocked, not only because of the violence, but because Marcus looked like any regular man. Then reporters found out who he really was, a soldier, a decorated hero. They interviewed his fellow soldiers, learned about his award, and the story exploded. By that evening, The U.S. Army released a statement. We are aware that one of our decorated service members was assaulted during a traffic stop and are investigating the matter with great concern. The statement confirmed Marcus's rank, his years of service, and his recent deployment. The Redwood Falls Police Department also released a statement. The incident is under internal review. Officer Daniel Rowe has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Administrative leave meant Rowe was still getting paid. A vacation, not punishment. But this time, the public wasn't having it. The mayor of Redwood Falls, Carlin Nguyen, watched the video 7 times. Each time, she grew angrier. She had promised transparency and reform when she became mayor 18 months earlier. And now she saw proof that her police department had not changed. She called the police chief, Robert Kane, and the district attorney. Then she called the state attorney general's office. She said, "This will not be swept under the rug. Find a way to fire him, or I'll find someone else to do your job." 5 days later, Officer Daniel Rowe was arrested and charged with assault, battery, deprivation of rights under color of law, a federal charge. That last one was serious. It meant they saw this not as a mistake, but as a civil rights crime. When Officer Daniel Rowe was arrested, it shocked the small town of Redwood Falls. Many had known him for years and could not believe the news. But the video told the truth more clearly than any words could. People across the country were talking about the man in the gray shirt who had simply asked a question and was attacked for it. Rowe hired a lawyer, Martin Blake, who often defended police officers accused of using too much force. The lawyer went on TV and said, "My client feared for his safety. He followed his training. He did nothing wrong." He claimed Marcus Hill had been aggressive and had not followed orders. He said Officer Rowe had to protect himself. He also said, "There was no way for my client to know that Mr. Hill was military." That comment angered people even more. It made it sound like Marcus's value depended on his uniform. As if being a soldier was the only reason a person deserved respect. But then, the second video came out, the one from the gas station. News channels showed both the dashcam and the security camera side by side. Every lie from Rowe's report fell apart. Viewers could see Marcus calm and polite. They saw him pulled out, slammed down, and handcuffed for no reason. There was no aggression, no resistance, just a man asking, "Why am I being asked to exit the vehicle?" The police union at first stood behind Rowe. They released a statement saying, "Police work is dangerous. Officers must make split-second decisions. It's unfair to judge them afterward." But as public anger grew, sponsors stopped donating to union events. Politicians who had once supported the police began to distance themselves. Soon, the union's support became quieter. The Redwood Falls police chief, Robert Kane, tried to calm the community. "We are cooperating with the investigation," he said in a press conference. But people wanted more than words. They wanted change. Mayor Carlin Nguyen didn't stay silent. She told reporters, "We cannot keep saying this will never happen again. We must make sure it truly never does." Under pressure from state officials and the public, Chief Kane was forced to suspend Rowe permanently while the case moved forward. Meanwhile, Marcus Hill stayed quiet. He didn't post on social media. He didn't do interviews at first. He was healing, both physically and mentally. His neck hurt when he turned it, and bruises covered his shoulders. But worse than the pain was the memory of not being able to breathe, of lying helpless even after doing everything right. He told his mother, "I just wanted to get home. I followed every rule Dad taught me. It still didn't matter." Soon, reporters found Marcus. They showed up outside his lawyer's office, asking for interviews. Finally, he agreed to speak, once. He said calmly, "I did not want to be the face of anything. I just wanted to go home that night. But if my story can help stop this from happening to someone else, then maybe something good can come out of it." His words spread everywhere. They played on national TV and social media. People saw not only a soldier but a son, a human being who had done everything right and still been hurt. The Army supported Marcus publicly. High-ranking officers attended his hearing. The Secretary of the Army said, "Sergeant Hill served his country with honor. What happened to him is unacceptable." Marcus's bravery overseas became part of the story. Photos of him in uniform saving soldiers under fire were shown next to clips of him being handcuffed on the roadside. The contrast was powerful. In Washington, lawmakers began talking about police reform again. The case reignited debates about racial profiling and police accountability. For many Americans, the story of Marcus Hill was another painful reminder that the color of your skin could change how you were treated by the law. At the same time, the town of Redwood Falls was divided. Some residents supported Marcus, holding signs that said, "Justice for Hill and accountability for all." Others defended Rowe, saying he was a good cop who made a mistake. But as more evidence came out, fewer people could deny what the videos showed. By the time Rowe's trial began 4 months later, the whole country was watching. The courtroom was full every day. Cameras waited outside to catch every update. The prosecution presented both videos, expert witnesses, and medical reports. They showed how Marcus's neck and shoulder injuries matched what the videos revealed. They called use of force specialists who explained, "Every move Officer Rowe made broke department rules. There was no reason to use that level of force." Then, Marcus took the stand. He walked into court wearing the same clothes from that night. Gray t-shirt and jeans. Clean, pressed, simple. He wanted the jury to see exactly who he was that evening. A regular man on his way home. He spoke calmly and clearly. He told the story step by step. "I saw the lights. I pulled over. I followed the rules. I asked a question. Then I was thrown down." He did not raise his voice. He did not exaggerate. He didn't have to. The truth was strong enough. When the defense lawyer cross-examined him, trying to make him angry, Marcus stayed steady. He had faced enemy fire before. A courtroom couldn't shake him. The lawyer asked, "Why didn't you tell the officer you were in the military?" Marcus answered, "I didn't think I had to. I was off duty in civilian clothes. Everyone deserves respect, not just soldiers." That answer was replayed on every news channel in America. Then the defense called Officer Rowe to the stand. It was a mistake. He came across as angry and defensive. He said he felt threatened. When asked what exactly threatened him, his answers were vague. His tone, Rowe said. "Did he shout?" the prosecutor asked. "No." "Did he move suddenly?" "No." "Did he have a weapon?" "No." "Did he resist before you grabbed him?" "No." "So, Officer Rowe," the prosecutor said, "what exactly made you feel in danger?" Rowe hesitated. Then he said, he had a look in his eyes. The courtroom went silent. Then the prosecutor asked, "Would it have made a difference if you knew he was in the military?" Rowe said, "Yes, probably." The prosecutor paused, then said softly, "So you treat soldiers with respect, but regular people can be brutalized for asking a question." The words hit like a hammer. The jury looked at Rowe. He realized too late how his answer sounded. The jury deliberated for only 3 hours. When they returned, the verdict was guilty on all charges. Daniel Rowe was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and ordered to pay Marcus for medical costs and emotional damage. The amount was large enough that Rowe would be paying it off for many years after his release. After the verdict, Mayor Nguyen spoke at a press conference. "This is not just justice for one man," she said. "This is a warning to every officer who thinks the badge makes them untouchable. It doesn't." The Redwood Falls Police Department was placed under federal supervision. Chief Robert Kane resigned. Officers Porter and Lowe, who had stood by and done nothing, were suspended and required to take retraining. The city reached a settlement with Marcus Hill for an undisclosed amount believed to be in the millions. Marcus donated part of it to organizations that help victims of police violence, both soldiers and civilians. The story of Marcus Hill and Officer Rowe became a turning point. It showed that sometimes accountability is possible. The trial may have ended, but the story was far from over. For Officer Daniel Rowe, the sentence was just the beginning of a very long punishment, one that went far beyond prison walls. When the media frenzy faded and cameras stopped flashing, Rowe sat in his cell, thinking about the moment everything went wrong. The silence around him was heavy. Every sound, the closing of doors, the footsteps of guards, echoed like reminders of what he had lost. He once wore a badge with pride. He once believed he was protecting people. But now he saw the truth clearly. The power he had used so easily was never truly his, it was borrowed, and it came with responsibility. He had abused that trust. Rowe's fellow officers turned away from him. Many of them said he had embarrassed the department. Some said quietly that he was just unlucky, that everyone makes mistakes. But deep down, even they knew it wasn't just a mistake, it was a choice. For years, Rowe had ignored his own bias. He had judged people by how they looked, how they spoke, and where they came from. He had been warned during training to be fair and calm, but he had learned a different lesson from some older officers. Don't take chances. If someone looks suspicious, treat them like a threat. That lesson had destroyed his life. Meanwhile, Marcus Hill was still healing. He had become a quiet hero across the country. People wrote him letters, students, mothers, veterans. They thanked him for staying calm, for showing strength without hate. One letter said, "You showed my son that real courage is not about fighting, but about standing firm when you're treated unfairly." Another said, "You gave us hope that truth still matters." Marcus read every message carefully. Some made him smile, others made him cry. He didn't feel like a hero. He just felt tired. He still had flashbacks. Sometimes, when he saw police lights on the road, his hands trembled. Sometimes, when he closed his eyes, he could still feel the ground under his face and the weight on his neck. But he refused to let the fear control him. He went to therapy. He spoke to other veterans about trauma and control. Slowly, he began to heal, not just physically, but inside. A few months later, Marcus received an invitation to speak at a community event in Washington, D.C. It was a national meeting about justice and police reform. At first, he didn't want to go. But then he thought of all the young people who had written to him. He decided to speak. Standing on that stage, under bright lights, he took a deep breath and said, "I'm not here as a soldier. I'm here as a man who followed every rule and still got hurt. What happened to me shouldn't happen to anyone. We can't fix the past, but we can stop it from repeating." The audience stood and clapped for a long time. That night, his speech was played on every major network. Journalists called it the calm cry for justice. But Marcus wasn't trying to be famous. He just wanted peace. He didn't want anyone, officer or civilian, to go through what he had gone through. As months passed, changes began to happen. The Redwood Falls Police Department created new training programs focused on empathy and de-escalation. Officers now had to go through yearly evaluations to test their ability to handle pressure without aggression. The department also installed new cameras, ones that could not be turned off manually. Every stop, every arrest, every moment would be recorded. The state governor signed a new law called the Accountability Act, which required that all officers who commit violent misconduct lose their pensions and cannot work in law enforcement again. It was one of the toughest reforms in the country, and many said it began because of Marcus Hill's case. Meanwhile, Rowe's life behind bars was difficult. Some inmates mocked him for being a cop. Others ignored him completely. But the hardest thing for him was the silence, the long hours of sitting alone, replaying that night in his head. He thought about his family, His wife had left him. His teenage son refused to visit. His daughter, only 8 years old, sent him a drawing once. It showed their family standing together under the sun smiling. The words under it read, "Come home soon, Daddy." He stared at that drawing for hours, realizing that the man his daughter remembered no longer existed. One day, during a prison counseling session, Rowe broke down. "I ruined everything," he said. "For what? For ego. For power. For thinking that wearing a badge made me better." The counselor nodded, but didn't speak. Rowe continued, "He wasn't dangerous. He was just a man asking a question, and I didn't even listen." He cried, really cried, for the first time in years. That moment didn't erase what he'd done, but it was the first time he truly saw himself as the villain in someone else's story. In another part of the country, Marcus visited a youth center for kids who had lost trust in the police. He told them, "Don't let anger destroy your heart. Change starts when we demand better, not when we lose hope." A boy in the audience asked, "Do you forgive him?" Marcus paused for a long time before answering. He said quietly, "Forgiveness doesn't mean I forget what he did. It means I refuse to carry the hate. I forgive so I can move forward." The room went silent. Even the adults listening had tears in their eyes. Months later, a journalist asked Marcus if he would ever meet Daniel Rowe again if given the chance. Marcus thought about it and said, "If he wants to meet, I'll listen. Maybe he needs to hear what his actions did, not to punish him, but to help him understand. Maybe that's how real change begins." By then, the story had become more than a headline. Schools used it in lessons about justice. Churches and mosques discussed it in sermons. Police academies showed it during training, reminding recruits what not to become. The story of Marcus Hill and Officer Daniel Rowe became a modern parable, one about power, prejudice, and redemption. In the end, both men were changed forever. Marcus became an advocate for fairness, traveling to different cities to talk about reform. He spoke softly, but his words carried power. People respected him not for anger, but for his calm strength. Daniel Rowe, on the other hand, served his time quietly. He took classes, read books on psychology and race, and began mentoring younger inmates. For the first time, he started listening more than he spoke. When Rowe was finally released, he didn't return to Redwood Falls. He moved to a small town in another state, working a simple job fixing cars. He didn't speak to reporters. He didn't seek attention. He lived quietly, trying to rebuild the pieces of a life he had shattered. Sometimes, he watched the news and saw Marcus speaking at an event. He would turn off the TV, sit in silence, and whisper, "I'm sorry." No one heard him, but maybe that was enough. 2 years passed. The world moved on to new headlines, new scandals, and new stories, but the name Marcus Hill still meant something. To many, it stood for calm strength in the face of injustice. To others, it was a reminder that power without accountability always leads to ruin. Redwood Falls had changed too. The police department had new leadership, new training, and new community programs. The town no longer wanted to forget what had happened. They wanted to learn from it. A mural was painted near the town square. It showed Marcus standing with one hand raised, not in anger, but in peace. Below it were the words, "Respect should never depend on a uniform." People stopped to take photos. Children pointed at it and asked their parents what it meant. And every time someone explained, the lesson continued. Marcus had moved to Washington, D.C., where he worked with a foundation that helped veterans and victims of police abuse. His life was peaceful, but he still carried the scars. Some nights, when sirens echoed through the city, he'd pause, breathe deeply, and remind himself that he was safe. He often said in interviews, "Healing isn't forgetting, it's learning to live again." One afternoon, Marcus received a letter with no return address. Inside was a single piece of paper folded neatly. It read, I don't expect forgiveness, but I need to say it. I was wrong. I see it now. Every moment of that night plays in my mind. You didn't deserve it. You never did. I thought I was doing my job, but I was protecting my ego, not the law. I took something from you that I can't give back. I'm sorry. D. Rowe. Marcus sat quietly for a long time, holding the letter in his hands. There was no anger left in him, only a deep, quiet sadness. He didn't know where Daniel Rowe was or what his life looked like now, but he decided to write back. You can't undo the past, but you can live differently from now on. Make the lesson count. Help someone who can't help themselves. That's how you make peace with what you've done. He mailed the letter the next day and never expected a reply. He didn't need one. That night, Marcus walked outside his apartment. The city lights reflected on the wet pavement after a light rain. He looked up at the stars and thought about how small every human life seemed from up there, and yet how much harm or healing one choice could bring. He whispered to himself, "We all wear a uniform, whether we know it or not, the uniform of our actions." Months later, a documentary crew asked Marcus for an interview. He had refused many before, but this time he agreed. The film was about stories that changed America's view on justice. During the interview, the host asked him, "What do you think justice really means?" Marcus smiled faintly and said, "Justice isn't revenge. It's truth with accountability. It's when we admit what we did wrong and try to do right next time." The host asked, "And forgiveness?" Marcus answered, "Forgiveness is freedom from hate, from pain, from being stuck in that one moment. You don't forgive for the other person. You forgive for your own soul." Those words became the closing line of the documentary. Meanwhile, in a small workshop on the edge of a quiet town, Daniel Rowe fixed an old pickup truck. His hands were covered in grease, but for the first time in years, they didn't shake. On the radio, he heard Marcus's voice from that same interview. He stopped working and listened. When he heard the line about forgiveness, tears filled his eyes. He whispered softly, "Thank you." He didn't deserve peace, but in that moment, he felt something close to it. In Redwood Falls, the police academy introduced a new training session titled the Hill Protocol. It included Marcus's story as a case study in ethics, restraint, and respect. New officers were required to watch the video and discuss what went wrong. One young recruit raised his hand during the lesson and asked, "Why do we have to keep seeing this?" The instructor replied, "Because forgetting it is how it happens again." The room went quiet. Every year on the anniversary of that night, the city held a candlelight vigil at the mural site. Marcus didn't always attend. Sometimes he was out of town. Sometimes he preferred to stay private, but the people never forgot. Parents brought their children, teachers brought their students, and officers stood side by side with citizens, holding candles under the evening sky. They didn't come to relive the pain. They came to honor the lesson. At one of those vigils, Marcus finally attended quietly at the back. A little girl tugged on her mother's sleeve and whispered, "Mom, is that him?" Her mother smiled softly and nodded. "Yes, that's him." The girl walked up shyly and handed him a small white flower. "Thank you for being brave," she said. Marcus knelt down and smiled. "Thank you for believing in kindness." He placed the flower at the base of the mural, next to dozens of others. As the candles flickered in the night breeze, Marcus looked at the mural one last time. The painted version of him stared back, not as a soldier, not as a victim, but as a man who had turned pain into purpose. He whispered, "If only one person learns to think before they act, it was all worth it." Then he walked away, disappearing into the crowd, just another face among many, equal, ordinary, and free.